Welcome back to another explainer. So have you ever looked at some bizarre ancient myth and just thought to yourself, what if this isn't just a wild fairy tale? What if there's actually a hidden message packed inside? Well, today we're going to completely flip the way we look at history. We're diving into the pretty fascinating idea that ancient myths might actually be highly advanced data storage systems. We're going to focus specifically on the famous ancient Sumerian story of the Anunnaki. But we aren't looking at it as magic or, just fiction. Instead, we're going to look at it as an absolutely ingenious piece of ancient technology.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the ancient understanding problem. Second, the THD compression hypothesis. Third, we'll unpack the 6 layers of compressed data. Fourth, we'll go over validation and falsification parameters. And finally, we'll wrap up with real-world modern implications. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The ancient understanding problem.
Let's start with a major blind spot we have today, which we call the existing understanding problem. Think about it. When we read ancient stories about gods coming down from the sky or, creating humans out of clay, our modern brains almost immediately categorize that as just primitive fiction. We think, oh, those ancient folks just didn't understand science, so they made up some fairy tales. But by doing that, we are completely losing the critical data hidden within the myth. If we only see these narratives as simple, flat stories, we literally miss the vast, essential information those stories were originally designed to carry across thousands of years.
Section 2. The THD compression hypothesis.
This brings us to a really groundbreaking new tool for looking at these old texts. It's called the Triune Harmonic Dynamics, or THD hypothesis. This incredible framework was put together by Kevin L. Brown, who is a researcher, inventor, and author. He suggests we really need to stop looking at the Anunnaki narrative as just a myth, and instead start looking at it as a multi-layer informational compression system.
Now, what exactly does that mean in plain English? Let's define it. A multi-layer informational compression system is basically a method of encoding massive amounts of complex data into simple, easily shared narratives. Think about how you use a computer today. If you have hundreds of massive files, you can't just email them all at once, right? You compress them. You pack them into a single zip file. Kevin O. Brown's THD hypothesis argues that ancient people did the exact same thing. Lacking hard drives, they used highly memorable, dramatic stories as their zip files. It was a brilliant way to compress and preserve critical societal data over thousands of years.
There's a quote from the source material that hits the nail on the head here. The Anunnaki narrative may function simultaneously as a symbolic authority system and a civilizational memory compression mechanism. This basically emphasizes that the Anunnaki story served a dual purpose. It wasn't just entertaining fiction around a campfire, it actually helped maintain order and authority in their daily lives while secretly acting as a powerful, long-term memory bank for their early civilization.
Section 3. Unpacking the 6 layers. So, if the Anunnaki narrative is an ancient zip file, what actually happens when we double-click it? Well, according to the THD hypothesis, there are 6 possible systems neatly compressed inside this one story. First, institutional memory, which covers the basic rules of how their society functioned. Second, social hierarchy, meaning who is in charge and who follows. Third, labor organization, dictating how work and farming are divided up. Fourth, cosmological legitimacy, which is the idea that their laws literally come from the universe itself. Fifth, archetypal meaning, providing deep psychological lessons. And finally, the 6th layer, potentially distorted memory traces of anomalous events or encounters. Now let's break down how this actually works in practice.
It's fascinating because we can see exactly how a myth maps to a societal system. In the story, you have rulers descending from the sky. To an ancient citizen, that translates directly to cosmological legitimacy. It means the king's right to rule is unquestionable because it, quite literally, comes from the heavens. Next, the story talks about the gods creating human workers. That is simply compressed data for labor organization. It explains why the working class exists and why they have to do the heavy lifting. Finally, the tales of kingship lineage among the gods map perfectly to human social hierarchy. It's honestly brilliant. One simple story teaches the entire population exactly how their civilization operates.
But we really have to talk about Layer 6 for a second, because it is by far the most intriguing part of this entire hypothesis. Aside from just the everyday rules of society, these stories might contain potentially distorted memory traces of anomalous events or encounters. This means that some of the really bizarre, unexplainable details in the Anunnaki myth actually scratch that. Things that seem like pure sci-fi or magic to us today might actually be compressed records of real, highly unusual events. Events that early humans just simply didn't have the vocabulary to describe accurately at the time.
Section 4. Validation and falsification parameters.
Now, of course, an idea this big can't just be a fun guessing game. Any solid hypothesis needs strict rules to test it. So how do we prove or disprove this? Well, to validate this hypothesis, we need specific validation test mechanisms. We would look for these exact same multi-layer compression traits popping up in other ancient, totally unconnected cultures around the globe. If the Mayans, the Egyptians, and the Sumerians all use the exact same zip file technique, well, that strongly validates the theory. On the flip side, we have falsification parameters. We would disprove this hypothesis if we deeply analyze a narrative and find that it only functions as a literal, flat story, completely lacking any layered structural societal data. Setting these parameters keeps our analysis completely honest and impartial.
Section 5. Real-world modern implications.
Now that we understand the framework and how to test it, we have to ask the big, so what? Why does this matter to us right now? Well, there are massive real-world implications here. Step 1 is simply applying Kevin L. Brown's THD lens to decode these ancient narratives. Step 2 is where it gets really exciting. We can finally extract lost civilizational data that's basically been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. But step 3 is where we look to the future. By studying how our ancestors successfully preserved complex data for millennia using structural compression, we can actually apply those exact same storytelling techniques to our modern long-term data storage solutions. Because let's face it, a USB drive might corrupt in a few decades, but a great story? That lasts forever.
It completely changes how you view the past, doesn't it? The Anunnaki narrative wasn't just some fairy tale made up to pass the time. It was a highly engineered, multi-layered informational compression system. And that leaves us with one massive, thrilling question to ponder. What other ancient stories are actually just zip files waiting for us to extract their hidden data? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.